Hello and welcome back to my series of videos and narrative on the science of evolution. My name is Tony and this video looks at the start of a subject that supports evolution, deep time. I say start because I have broken the subject down into separate parts, starting with sedimentary rock. Subjects that I will cover in deep time include sedimentary rocks, cosmic background radiation, redshift, and the various dating methods used to establish the age of fossils, etc., etc. Now, in case you're wondering why I have this photo of myself as a musician on these videos, it is because I am a musician, a multi-instrumentalist, singer-songwriter. If you would like to check out my songs, please check out my Buzzbaits channel. Young Earth creationists do not believe or accept deep time. They believe that a supernatural being created the universe and used a magic spell on mud to create the first humans, Adam and Eve, 6,000 years ago. They believe that because the universe and the Earth is so young, that dinosaurs lived with humans, as in the children's cartoon, The Flintstones. We are going to look at the evidence that science supports a universe that is billions of years old. And we are going to start with planet Earth. Yes, the Earth. We're going to focus on one planet. The Earth is just one of billions of planets within our galaxy. A galaxy that is just one of billions of galaxies that make up our known universe. Let us start looking at the evidence for deep time by looking at sedimentary rock and the father of geology, James Hutton. Hutton lived in the 18th century, and it was his observations and predictions of the landscape around his home in Edinburgh and at a farm he worked on in the southeast of Scotland that led to his reasoning that geological features were not static, that they underwent perpetual transformation over long periods of time. Prior to his understanding of sedimentary rock, Hutton made some observations. In the summer of 1785, at Glentilt in the Cairngorm Mountains in the Scottish Highlands, Hutton found granite in a mountain that indicated to him that it had been molten at another time in history. Hutton reasoned that granite formed from the cooling of molten rock, rather than it precipitating out of water as other religious believers thought at that time. Hutton's new perspective placed him in opposition with the then popular Neptunist theories of Abraham Werner, that all rocks had precipitated out of a single enormous flood. Hutton proposed that the interior of the Earth was hot, and that this heat was the engine which drove the creation of new rock. This was in contradiction to religious beliefs that the land was static and the result of a great flood. Hutton proposed that land was eroded by air and water and deposited as layers in the sea. Heat then consolidated the sediment into stone and uplifted it into new lands. The theory was dubbed Plutonist and was in contradiction to the flood myth. We therefore had two theories at one point in history. Which one had the most substance? One supported a religious perspective of a flood. This was Neptunism. This proposed that rocks formed from the crystallization of minerals in the early Earth's oceans. And then there was Plutonism, the geological theory that the igneous rocks forming the Earth originated from intrusive magmatic activity, with a continuing gradual process of weathering and erosion, wearing away rocks which were then deposited on the seabed, reformed into layers of sedimentary rock by heat and pressure, and raised again. This opened up the concept of deep time. Hutton's main line of argument was that the tremendous displacement and changes he was observing in landscapes and mountains did not happen in a short period of time by means of a catastrophic flood, but that the process was still happening on the Earth in the present. That these processes were gradual, so the Earth needed to be ancient to allow time for the changes we observe. We will look closer at igneous rocks in further videos, but for now we are going to concentrate on sedimentary rock and the evidence that this provides for deep time. Hutton inherited from his father the Berwickshire farms of Slighthouses, a lowland farm in the southeast of Scotland. In about 1753, he became interested in studying the surface of the earth. He studied every ditch or riverbed that came his way. Clearing and draining his farm provided ample opportunities. He noted that a vast proportion of present rocks were composed of materials afforded by the destruction of bodies, animal, vegetable, and mineral, of more ancient formation. Hutton concluded that sedimentary rocks are the product of weathering and pre-existing rocks. Air, ice, wind, or water flow can carry these particles. They are then transported to some basin or depression where sediment is trapped. Layers then can build. If the sediment is buried deeply, it becomes compacted and cemented, forming sedimentary rock. So, sedimentary rocks are rocks that have been deposited by water, ice, or wind. They collect in layers. Hence, we find fossils trapped within these layers, and they solidify. Here are some examples of sedimentary rocks. These are clastic sedimentary rocks. They are rock fragments that are cemented together. They are individual grains of quartz, clay minerals, or mica, etc. They include gravel, sandstone, and mud rock. These are biochemical sedimentary rocks. They are created when organisms use material dissolved in air or water to build their tissues. Limestone is a common type of carbonate sedimentary rock. Limestone is composed mostly of the minerals calcite and aragonite. About 20 to 25% of sedimentary rocks are carbonate rock, and most of it is limestone. Most limestone was formed in shallow marine environments. Chalk is a variety of limestone and is composed of the shells of minute marine organisms. Imagine that. The white cliffs of Dover in England are the result of millions and millions of dead marine organisms that lived millions and millions of years ago. The next time you walk past a chalk pit, think about what that environment looked like millions of years ago. Coal is also a sedimentary rock. Its evolution starts when dead plant material decays into peat and is converted into coal by the heat and pressure of deep burial over millions of years. Coal originates in former wetlands. These are called coal forests, and they covered much of the Earth's tropical land areas during the late Carboniferous and Permian times, between 358 to 298 million years ago. Other coal deposits date from the Mesozoic, 252 to 66 million years ago. The conversion of dead vegetation into coal is called coalification. The process began when dead plant material was protected from biodegradation and oxidation, usually by mud or acidic water, and was converted into peat. This trapped the carbon in immense peat bogs that were eventually deeply buried by sediments. Then, over millions of years, the heat and the pressure of deep burial caused the loss of water, methane and carbon dioxide. The grade of coal produced depended on the maximum pressure and temperature reached. Coal comes from plants. Plants get their energy from the sun. Therefore, the energy in coal also came from the sun. Heat and pressure turn dead plants into coal, and that process to create high-grade coal takes deep time. So, limestone provides us with some compelling evidence why sedimentary rock proves deep time. About 20% of a sedimentary rock is carbonate, most of it limestone. The rest is mostly dolomite. It has two polymorphs. These are two types of commonly occurring minerals, optically clear calcite and aragonite. One common type is chalk, which is very fine calcite fossils. But how does calcite relate to evidence of deep time? Well, we are able to scientifically examine calcite, and we know that these skeletal grains have a composition reflecting the organisms that produced them and the environment in which they were produced. And chalk are the remains of micromarine organisms from shallow ocean floors. Yes, the white cliffs of Dover were once at the bottom of a shallow ocean floor. Therefore, let us look at the type of environment and process that is required to create chalk from trillions and trillions of marine microorganisms. Well, we need warm waters, we need calm seas, low pressure and low acidity. Precipitation occurs when the CaCO3 falls out of the water it was dissolved in. And then accumulation, which equals the net gain of CaCO3 on the ocean floor. Followed by compression. It takes centuries for this process to complete. It takes time, lots of time. We know that limestone has variable rates of precipitation and deposition, and the factors that impact on this process includes temperatures in which we see faster accumulation in warm waters. We know that solubility goes down as the temperature goes up. Remember, solubility decreases as temperature rises. According to the flood myth, the conditions did not equal what we know is required for this process. It was not a calm, warm, low-pressure environment. The flood, the mythical flood, did not provide calm currents. Calm currents are required for limestone accumulation. Scientists do not observe this process occurring in violent flood conditions. The acidity caused by the mythical flood would not provide correct conditions, and we know that accumulation occurs faster under lower pressures. The pressure of the mythical flood would have been extreme. And yet, for young Earth creationists to promote their idea of a great global flood, accumulation would have had to have been 7 times faster than it is viewed today in conditions that would not allow it to occur in the first place. It took time, and we really do know and accept that the White Cliffs of Dover had their origins in the Cretaceous period, when the map of our planet looked very different to how it looks today. Look at this image. It is a conglomerate rock, and the scientific analysis proves that it was formed during separate environmental conditions. A conglomerate rock is one that is made from water-worn fragments of other older rocks. This is real. It can be observed. It can be studied. The rocks can be read. And the evidence reveals that it took more than a mythical flood to create this end product. We have already looked at the cycles that many sedimentary rocks have to endure before they become compacted, and we are aware that pressure and heat and time play important roles in this process. Creationists would have you believe that a world-shattering flood explains geological history after the initial creation of Earth by a supernatural being. It makes for a good story. However, this conglomerate was buried deep enough underground for temperature and pressure to forge it into new rock. Now, creationists might say that the Great Flood buried this rock. This is only part of the story. Imagine if the Great Flood buried a riverbed composed of many different types of rock deep enough below ground for temperatures and pressure to forge it into new rock. Yes, new rock. Preserved in it, you can see the original particles of sand, gravel and cobbles made of various kinds of rock. And if you look closely, you can see some of the cobbles are themselves conglomerates, rocks within rocks. The conglomerate of fragments of an older conglomerate not only requires a first round of erosion, deposition and burial deep enough to turn the original sediments into rock, it requires another whole cycle to turn the second pile of sedimentary rock fragments into another conglomerate. In other words, this one rock shows that there is more to the geological record than creationists describe. A single grand flood cannot explain this conglomerate. Maybe there was a second great flood that the Bible forgot to record. Or does the process of sedimentary rock as described in the science of geology provide evidence of deep time? You now have a better understanding regarding what constitutes sedimentary rocks and how they form. But how does sedimentary rock formations relate to the mythical Great Flood? Creationists claim the Grand Canyon is a result of the flood. But no. A catastrophic flood event did not create the Grand Canyon. Water did not dissolve all that rock within 40 days or even a year. The science of geology and the science of physics do not support this myth. If it had happened, then it would not have been localized to just this area of America. We do not find a uniformed layer of sedimentary rock spread over the entire surface of the Earth. We just don't. There simply is no scientific evidence for a great flood at the Grand Canyon. Let us now turn our attention to Mount Everest. At 29,031 feet, it is the highest mountain on planet Earth's surface. The sedimentary rock found at the summit of Everest is limestone, grey limestone. Remember how we looked at limestone's association with ancient marine life? Well, the highest point on the Earth's surface was once at the bottom of the ocean bed. But how can this be so? Well, the continents are carried by the Earth's tectonic plates, like people on an escalator. There are currently 7 giant plates sliding across the Earth's surface. It has taken 60 million years for Everest to form. It was the result of India moving northwards towards the continent of Eurasia. It moved at about 15 centimeters per year. Current observations conclude that the continents slide, collide, and recede from one another at the rate of between 1 to 20 centimeters a year. They are driven by internal heat deep in the earth that is able to escape efficiently by convection. Convection is the process that drives hot currents of gas or liquid upwards because they are less dense, and cold currents of liquid downwards because they are more dense. The continents are like giant accumulations of rock debris lying atop the tectonic plates. Continental drift is observed and measured at 1 inch per year. This is plate tectonics. It therefore took millions of years for the seabed at the bottom of an ocean to be pushed to the summit of Mount Everest. We observe the process today, and it has been the same for millions of years, once again supporting the evidence for deep time. Creationists would have you believe that the layers of sedimentary rock on planet Earth are the result of a flood. That flood shook up all the sedimentary rock and it fell into the layers we observe today. Their evidence is an ancient religious book called the Bible, and they claim it all happened just 4,000 years ago. But sedimentary rocks actually provide evidence for deep time. And deep time, in the science of geology, supports evolutionary biology. Clastic sedimentary rocks are made of minerals such as quartz and mica, etc. These type of rocks include gravel, sandstone and mud rocks. And then we have biochemical rocks such as limestone, coal or chert. Their origins are from ancient marine organisms and dead plants. As we have noted in this video, the process of erosion through water and wind and eventually compaction requires enormous pressure and heat and time. And the process of creating sedimentary rocks such as coal is something that certainly requires time, and this challenges the flood myth. Nevertheless, creationists will state that this process was the result of the flood. As evidence, they will take a glass container, fill it with water and fragments of sedimentary rock. They will shake the container and show you how the various fragments fall into layers. This will be their evidence for a great flood. Indeed, but such tactics do not explain conglomerates. A conglomerate, as we have noted in this video, is the result of the erosion compaction process happening more than once. They are sedimentary rocks within sedimentary rocks. Unless there were other floods, which we are unaware of, there is no explanation from the original flood myth concerning conglomerates. Please read up on James Hutton and how he established sedimentary rocks as evidence for deep time. Or get yourself a glass container, fill it with water and fragments of sedimentary rock, shake it and watch the layers fall, if that is what you wish to believe. And then there is the issue of chalk and coal. Chalk is a variety of limestone, and its origins are ancient microscopic marine organisms. There are many chalk pits across southeast England. They can be found deep in the countryside, deep inland. Are we expected to believe that shallow, tropical oceans from which chalk originates existed 4,000 years ago, where the English countryside exists today? We have looked at how coal is the product of dead plant material that turns to peat, and through deep burial, pressure and heat, peat then turns to coal. It takes thousands of years for dead plant material to turn to peat. To produce high-grade black anthracite coal, we require millions of years of burial for pressure and heat to transform the peat into a coal product. Most of the world's coal reserves are deep underground, sometimes as far as 1,000 feet. A catastrophic flood 4,000 years ago did not transform dead plant material into peat and bury it deep into the earth
and then turn it into coal in such a short period of time. Scientists such as Alfred Wagner and Arthur Holmes proposed and developed the ideas of continental drift, which has since been subsumed by plate tectonics. Remember at the start of this video, I spoke about how religious people prior to James Hutton thought the Earth was static. Well, science has changed that perspective. These geological discoveries, such as plate tectonics, explain the Grand Canyon and Mount Everest. And yes, once again, support deep time. And as we have noted in this video, continental drift and plate tectonics totally explains why we find fragments of fossils atop Mount Everest. And if any creationist attempts to state that the fossils look like they had been in a flood, please respond politely that they are wrong. Fragments have been found, and they are the result of deep time and the tectonic plates pushing up a seabed to a mountain top. And it took more than 4,000 years. In respect to fossils, we only find them in sedimentary rocks because these rocks are formed in much lower pressure and temperature compared to other rock types. The pressure and temperature are just right to allow remains of dead plants and animals to be preserved. Of the sedimentary rocks, most fossils are found in shale, limestone, and sandstone. And when we discover fossils, it is interesting to note that we never find the fossil of a Neanderthal next to a dinosaur. We never find the fossil of a rabbit on the bottom layers next to early marine fossils. We find the fossils where we would expect to find them on the geological timeline of sedimentary layering. Once again, proving there was no flood and supporting the evidence for deep time. But more about fossils in another video. So, the evidence for sedimentary rocks versus the Great Flood. Do we believe that a global flood 4,000 years ago caused all the sedimentary rock layers we see today? Or do we accept the explanation from geology of the sedimentary process with erosion through wind, ice and water to compaction? Do we accept the origins of biochemical sedimentary rocks such as limestone as being the product of ancient marine organisms? Do we accept the process by which coal is formed? Coal is formed from dead plant material, turning to peat and then to coal. And it's a fact that such a process takes millions of years to produce high-grade coal. Do we accept the evidence of conglomerate rocks which require a repeat of the process to produce sedimentary rock within sedimentary rock? Do we accept continental drift and plate tectonics for the creation of the Grand Canyon and Mount Everest? Please take note that certain creationists, such as Vance Nelson, will provide misinformation concerning fossils on Everest. You will have possibly heard Kent Hovind state that clams were found on Mount Everest and that they were closed, proving a quick death and therefore evidence of a great flood. Try and find the peer-reviewed paper that supports Hovind's claims. Yes, it does not exist. This is something that Vance Nelson reported and Hovind has run with it. However, regardless of this, even if it was true, we already know that marine fossils were not deposited by a flood. The summit of Everest was once at the bottom of an ancient seabed. Any fossils originate from this source and were not deposited by a flood on top of the mountain. Continental drift and plate tectonics created Everest. In respect of clams, well, clams are only normally open when you boil them in water. It's a panic reaction to the boiling water. Burying them at the bottom of a seabed would not have resulted in them opening. Also, clams produce a protein called paramycin, which enables them to hold their shell closed in contraction, even after death, until the protein breaks down. Any number of pressures can easily keep them closed after death, long enough to be sealed in other ways, including calcification. Anyway, thank you for watching this video, and I hope it presented some interesting points regarding sedimentary rocks and the evidence for deep time. I will be looking at other rocks and topics such as fossils, redshift, background radiation and carbon dating in other videos. Thank you once again, and I look forward to your feedback.